What's going on, everybody? Today I wanted to go over all the Paragon trees, at least the 4 we have unlocked, talk about which ones you can combine and which ones are the ones you're going to want to use depending on what content you're going in. Let's get into it. All right, so we have Vanquisher, Survivor, Treasure Hunter, as well as Gladiator. Now, when we're talking about each one of these trees, we have 2 parts to it. We have 1, attributes, and the second part, the skills. Attributes are permanently active no matter what. If you have a tree active, like the Treasure Hunter tree I have active currently, the attributes will remain active in any other tree that you've put them in. If I were to activate Gladiator here, the skills are now active on whatever tree I have active and not the other trees that I have that are inactive. So attributes permanent, the skills are active whenever whatever tree you have active. Vanquisher is the first one that I want to talk about, however, and this one is going to be your classic PvE damage dealer tree. It's going to increase your damage in PvE, but not really in any other game mode. Now, first off, we have the attributes that I want to talk about, and that is going to be potency. Potency resistance are somewhat on the more useless side of things in PvE content. Potency can be good in some bleeds and things like that. However, CC is not going to really matter in any sort of PvE content. So if you have CC, potency is not going to really change the outcome there. Damage, life, all good. All very, very good stats in general and in PvE specifically. These are really, really good stats. Armor pen oftentimes has a kind of soft cap. This is a difference of stats. So once you get so much more than your opponent, it's not going to matter a whole lot. But overall, armor pen actually does give you a little bit of value in PvE content. Now we have the 5 skills. We have Exorcism, 5% increased damage done to monsters. Zeal, increasing attack speed by 0.5% for 6 seconds up to 10 times, so 5% for each monster we defeat. Wrath, same thing, but for damage done rather than attack speed. Judgment, we have after defeating 5 monsters, we get a guaranteed critical strike. And then Heart of Wrath turns these 2 into 15 stacks instead of 10. Very, very solid there. Overall, as you can see, these are just going to increase your percentage damage as well as percentage attack speed against monsters. Very, very simplistic. I will say this is a tree that can be useful in increasing your damage. However, I will say that PvE content in this game is very, very easy. And as long as you're reaching the combat rating of the required zone, this will not matter because you will have the ability to kill off the enemies as long as you have the combat rating. If you're lower than the combat rating and you're really, really struggling to kill off monsters, you may want to bring this. But more importantly than anything, I think that the one thing that we have not mentioned in this tree yet, which is deeper pockets, this is an amazing, amazing attribute for players that are free to play. If you do not have the Boon of Plenty, you are missing a bunch of inventory rows. This allows you to have 5 additional ones. So overall, Vanquisher is going to be your classic PvE damage tree. And if you're struggling in PvE content, open world dungeons, things like that, you may want to run it. Although I think that that content's pretty easily done as long as you have the combat rating for it. And this doesn't really change your combat rating. But I will say deeper pockets might just be good enough to run it if you're free to play. At least getting this top row, which will only require you to have 16 points in it. So that's not bad. Next up, we have Survivor. This is going to be your PvE surviving tree, as it says, to go ahead and live longer. Now, some of the stats in here, like armor, again, it's a difference of stat, which means as long as you have more than your opponent, you're getting value. And the more you have of your opponent, it's not going to do too much because there's heavy diminishing returns for it. So overall, I'm not a huge fan of armor. Resistance is the same thing as I mentioned earlier. It's going to go ahead and reduce those stuns and harmful effects, but overall, not going to be doing a whole lot in PvE. Then we have damage, life, and life at the beginning. All very, very good. Let's dive into the 5 skills here. For every 10% of missing life, you take 1.2% less damage. Very solid. Also works in PvP. So honestly, you could run this tree in PvP, and we'll go over a few other skills that I think are solid in PvP. Stalwart, whenever you drop below 30% life, you gain increased block chance. Honestly, actually quite solid for the Crusader because it works well with our basic that increases block chance. But overall, this is not going to do a whole lot for a lot of other classes because it's a small chance increase and you already don't have a large amount of block chance. Escape Artist, whenever we're below 30% life, we gain 35% increased movement speed and can move unhindered through monsters for 6 seconds. This last part, unhindered through monsters, can keep you alive quite a bit, and 35% movement speed is pretty insane actually. And this can also be used in PvP to escape enemies, so pretty solid here in the Escape Artist. Then we have Indestructible. Fatal attacks from monsters instead reduce you to 1 life and make you immune to damage for 3 seconds. Now, this one I've heard is a little bit of a broken skill, at least from my information from Chosen. Go ahead and check out his video. I think he's going to post it today over on the Indestructible and how exactly it works. I personally have not had too much experience with this, and overall, not a huge fan of this, but I will say that it's actually quite solid for the challenge rifts, because you're going to be reduced to 1 life quite often in challenge rifts, and getting you 3 seconds of damage immunity can be solid if this works as intended. Then we have precognition, reducing these 2 to 45-second cooldowns. Overall, Survivor, okay. It's going to be particularly good with Crusaders for if you are at least running the Punish basic ability because of the Stalwart. But overall, not a great one. Honestly, if you're going to pick a PvE tree, definitely I would go with Vanquisher over Survivor. Now, this can be selectively good in PvP scenarios, but I will say that generally Gladiator, which we'll go over in a bit, is going to be better for you in PvP scenarios than Survivor. Next up, we have Treasure Hunter, everyone's favorite tree, as I'm sure you have all expressed your concerns and beliefs in my previous video, but we're going to go over briefly here because I've already gone over it in that video. So if you want to check it out a little bit more in that video, then I will go ahead and do so. And we'll talk about the overall implications of Treasure Hunter later on. Swift Learner going ahead, and we have 50% more experience gained from defeating elite monsters. This is in every area. Blues, yellows, and oranges, this works for. We have Gold Find, 50% extra gold for monsters in outdoor areas. This is a little bit interesting because from what I understand of this Gold Find one, it doesn't increase the gold amount, it increases the gold drops. So for example, if a monster dropped 100 gold, it wouldn't drop 150, it would drop a separate pile of 50 gold. If that makes sense. So then we have Treasure Find, 50% increased equipment drop rate. Now, a lot of you mentioned, okay, this doesn't increase legendary drop rate. There's no way you can confirm that. And there's also no way I could confirm that it increases legendary drop rate. But what I will say is that equipment drop rate implies that it increases the amount of equipment dropped by the enemies. Therefore, it also would increase legendary items because legendary items are dropped from those elite monsters. Now, important to note, this is elite monsters, so blues, yellows, and oranges, as well as only in outdoor areas. So again, no one can confirm or deny whether or not this is working as intended because the sample size required to do this would not just be a week of farming, 4 or 5 hours a day. It would literally be tens of thousands of legendary drops because of the way RNG works in this game. So again, it's hard to determine how impactful this is without knowing the drop rate as well as the sample size required to do so. Then we have Greed. This is going to increase these 2 bonuses to 75, or these 2 bonuses rather, the Lucky and the Treasure Find to 75%, which is quite solid, at least for the Treasure Find, as well as Lucky here. This one is a little bit interesting because this one will increase globe drop rate, which is like the Conduit globe, the Empowered globe, things like that. But it won't increase the Monstrous Essence or the XP globe. So overall, not a huge one, because if you're trying to rely on this for PvE strength, I would definitely rather just go with the Vanquisher tree, because this is also an RNG aspect, as well as you're not going to get a lot of globe drop rates in dungeons. You will get a few, but definitely not for the boss fights generally. So overall, this is going to increase your open world farming, but you don't really need to do that because it's generally an easier type of content. And then of course the stats, the attributes here. Armor Pen, quite solid in PvE, but overall I really like damage and life, which it does have. However, it's got armor, resistance, and potency. Resistance and potency particularly very, very poor. Honestly, top 2 rows of this tree are quite solid. The bottom one is kind of mediocre. But Treasure Hunter, very good PvE tree. As long as you're not struggling in PvE content, I see no reason not to run this. It is literally just free rewards, whereas like you're not going to miss out on the damage, at least if you're open world farming. But keep in mind that you do need to open world farm in order to take use out of these Treasure Find and the Gold Find. This one is for every area. So overall, if you're not farming a lot, or if you're not open world farming a lot, maybe it might be worth to go for Vanquisher. Personally, even if I don't open world farm and I just dungeon farm, I'd still rather have the 50% more experience because Vanquisher doesn't really increase our damage a whole lot. Last up, we have Gladiator. Now, Gladiator is going to be a solid one for PvP. This is going to be your go-to tree, in my opinion, for PvP, specifically for one skill, and that is going to be Cheat Death, but I'll go over that in just a moment. Now, this tree also has a lot of attributes that I quite like, at least in this top row. As you can see, life, damage, and then we have armor, potency, and armor pen. However, armor pen is going to be much worse. If you're not spending it a tremendous amount, you're going to not have the higher stats than your opponent, which makes it very difficult to get value out of this. Now, if you can reduce the amount of potency, or rather increase the amount of resistance that you have. It could matter a little bit because you could reduce some of those CCs. But overall, if you're not the top, if you're not spending the most, you're not going to get a lot of value out of these difference of stats, and you're not going to reduce the amount of value that the opponents are having all that much. But first skill, we have Uncontrollable. We have when struck by an effort which causes loss of control of your character, you are immune. So basically immuning every CC that happens to you every 30 seconds. This is really nice, especially for you Crusaders out there. On your horse, immune the CC effect, and then just go ahead and keep on going with your horse. Very, very solid. One of the biggest reasons why I take this tree along with Cheat Death. But we have the second skill, Quick-Witted, reducing the duration of loss of control effects by 10%. These two together are going to make you way, way, way harder to deal with because of the ability to not chain CC you all the time, or at least reducing the amount of effectiveness that actually has. So very, very good skill as well. Then we have Trapper. This one I would say is more for those ranged classes because you'll be able to run away. If you're down to 30% life, you probably are going to die as a melee class. So this is not going to get full value, but if you're ranged, you can back up, play the traps, and then hopefully that will help you survive. So overall, I would say this is a solid one for you ranged classes, but you would have to put 15 points into potency, which could be, okay, just not a huge thing that I enjoy doing. Then we have Cheat Death. This one's interesting because this one basically means when you reduce to 1 HP, instead of dying, you would go into this stasis effect for 3 seconds, and then after 3 seconds, you gain basically 60% or a whole nother health bar of life, which is huge. Now, this is the biggest reason why you run this tree, simply for the fact that you basically get a second life, and this allows you to get back up, keep chasing out the opponents. This is the hardest thing to deal with this tree. Every 120 seconds, this activates, so very, very impactful in your PvP battleground matches, and in the Rite of Exile and all the Shadow War or any battlegrounds in terms of the Rite of Exile as well. Very, very impactful skill. Then we have Rapid Recovery. This is going to reduce the Trapper and the Uncontrollable cooldowns by 10 seconds. Overall, the Trapper one isn't going to matter a whole lot. 240 to 230, not a huge deal. But Uncontrollable from 30 to 20 seconds, being able to immune a CC every 20 seconds is massive. Very, very impactful here. And overall, just a solid tree for everyone in PvP modes. But let's talk about the pairing of trees that I would recommend. So the first pairing of Paragon trees. Now, again, if you are below Paragon 80 or so, this is going to be very difficult for you to do because you just don't have enough points to put in your trees. But the first one is the PvE damage dealer. Now, for this one, I would highly recommend you go Vanquisher, pick up Zeal, pick up Wrath, ignore the armor pen, go for Judgment here. So in total, you're going to have 5, 30, 31, 32, and then you're going to have an additional 57 right there in total. And then you can pick up Judgment, that puts you at 58. And then you can go ahead and pick up Exorcism from the potency and Deeper Pockets if you'd like. But overall, I would say that these trees are really what you're looking for if you're looking for PvE damage. Exorcism is quite solid as well. So definitely very solid. You really want the damage though, and that's what we're trying to kind of keep up, because only a few trees offer damage, and so if you swap over from Vanquisher or if you swap over from another tree, you're not going to have as much damage, specifically because Vanquisher has the damage early on in its tree. And with this points, when you put about 57 to around 70 points or 76 points into Vanquisher, you could swap over to Treasure Hunter as the next one. Again, if you're looking for PvE content, damage is the earliest one in this tree. So again, if we compare this to Survivor, you can see damage is way far below the tree. Gladiator damage is way farther down the tree than the other Treasure Hunter. So we can get damage really early on, as well as picking up these other, for example, if we put only 21 points in, we'll get full damage as well as the Swift Learner, which is the two most important parts of this tree in my opinion. So you can pick up those two and do a very, very nice damage combination. Next one up is going to be the PvE Survivor, and that is going to be the Treasure Hunter plus Survivor tree. And mainly what you're going to want to pick up is the Indestructible down here, assuming this works correctly, as well as Escape Artist and Stalwart, allowing you to put roughly about 60 points in. Maybe you pick up the Life as well if you're interested in it. Very, very good and very, very solid tree there. Overall, the Survivor tree is pretty solid, but the damage tree, what I would recommend is maybe going to the Unyielding, Armor, Escape Artist, and if you are wanting to pick up the Stalwart, if you're more of a Crusader or you want to rely on the block chance, coming down to the indestructible and then picking up the damage, and then pairing that with the treasure hunter, again, with the damage and swift learner. Very, very good combination there. Then we have the full treasure hunter tree spec in, and this is going to be for those people who again aren't as pessimistic, or maybe don't feed into the game has RNG. This again I believe does work. Again, I cannot prove it or disprove it, but this is the full treasure hunter tree spec, and that is going to be picking up this top row, ignoring the lucky because this is not going to affect too much. It's going to really affect your open world farming in terms of speed. Sometimes, again, it's an RNG aspect. I personally don't like this all that much, and you're only missing out on life and potency down here, which isn't too important. And then along with this, speccing into any sort of PvE tree if you want to go full PvE, but for me, speccing into Gladiator and picking up and choosing which one I want to pick, depending on PvP or PvE. But again, if you pick up Treasure Hunter and go full spec in it, then you can kind of pick and choose whatever you want, because all you really care about is PvE if you're going full Treasure Hunter. But if you're like me and you really enjoy PvP, then you may want to spec into Gladiator as a second one. Or if you're full on only PvP, Gladiator tree, full Gladiator tree is going to be very, very good. Picking up the armor, picking up the rapid recovery. Specifically, this is going to cost you a lot of points, finishing off the damage. Once you finish off the damage, the armor, the rapid recovery, and if you're a ranged class, if you picked up the Trapper, going ahead and specking into Vanquisher for the extra damage here. I really, really like the extra damage, especially these two, because this is the earliest you can pick up damage in any tree. Damage, 5 damage here, then 1, and then additional 25 damage here. Very, very good for PvP goers out there. Or you could go into Gladiator, or Survivor rather, and pick up the life, or maybe mix and match. Okay, I want armor or life here. And you can kind of mix and match the attributes when you get to that point. But overall, Gladiator plus Vanquisher is my preferred PvP mode. So hopefully that gives you an idea on what Paragon trees I'd run in certain scenarios, what the advantage to these are. Once again, I'll very briefly just go over the kind of use case. Vanquisher, when you're behind the curve and you need the extra push for damage. Survivor, when you're behind the curve yet again and you need the extra push for survivability in PvE. Treasure Hunter for overall when you are just wanting some extra value in your PvE content, strictly for open world farming. And then Gladiator, PvP tree all the way, 100% best PvP tree in the game, specifically for the cheat death and the ability to revive with that 60% HP. Very, very impactful there. There you go. Hopefully you enjoyed, and I will see you for the next video.